He was the monster mothers warned their daughters about, King Gideon Stone, a man who had executed his last 3 potential mates for daring to bore him. The mating ceremony wasn't a celebration, it was a funeral procession for the hopeful. Hundreds of high-born she-wolves lined up, reeking of expensive perfume and terror, praying to be chosen, or perhaps praying to be ignored. But then she stepped forward. No jewelry, no fear, and no sight. She didn't bow. She didn't tremble. She simply tapped her cane against his throne and asked him to move. What happened next didn't just silence the hall. It brought the Alpha King to his knees. The grand hall of the Stone Pack was cold despite the hundreds of bodies pressed together within its obsidian walls. It wasn't a temperature issue. It was the chill of absolute, suffocating dread. The chandeliers, dripping with crystals that cost more than most packs earned in a decade, cast a sharp, unforgiving light on the women lined up in the center of the room. They were the elite, the daughters of beta generals, the pampered offspring of visiting alphas, and the desperate climbers who thought beauty was enough to tame a beast. They wore silks of crimson and gold, their hair pinned in intricate styles, their necks bared in submission. And on the throne, sitting with a posture that suggested he would rather be anywhere else, was Alpha King Gideon Stone. Gideon was not a man who fit the description of a romantic lead. He was terrifying. Standing at 6'5", he was a wall of muscle and scarred flesh, his eyes the color of a stormy sea, grey, turbulent, and currently incredibly bored. He tapped a single finger against the armrest of his iron throne. "Next," Gideon grunted. A young woman named Camilla, the daughter of a prominent alpha from the Southern Territories, stepped forward. She was stunning, with cascading blonde hair and eyes like emeralds. She curtsied low, her scent, vanilla and jasmine, wafting toward the throne. "My king," she purred, her voice trembling slightly despite her rehearsal. "I offer you my loyalty, my body, and my pack's alliance." Gideon didn't even shift in his seat. He inhaled deeply, then wrinkled his nose as if he'd smelled rotting meat. "You smell of desperation and your father's ambition. You're dismissed." Camilla blinked, tears instantly welling up. My king? I don't understand." "I said dismissed." Gideon's voice dropped an octave, causing the wine in the guests' glasses to ripple. "Leave before I decide your presence is an insult to my floorboards." Camilla fled, sobbing. The crowd shifted uneasily. This was the 15th rejection in an hour. Standing in the shadows near the servants' entrance was his beta, a man named Silas, who looked weary. He checked his clipboard. "Gideon, you have to pick someone. The council is breathing down my neck. You need an heir. You need a queen." "I need a mate who isn't a plastic doll wrapped in silk, Silas," Gideon snapped, standing up. The movement caused the entire front row of women to flinch back. "Look at them. They don't want me. They want the crown. They want the safety of the Stone Pack. If I lost my title tomorrow, they wouldn't look twice." "That is the nature of politics," Silas argued. "Just pick one." Camilla wasn't bad. Her hips were wide. She'd bear strong pups. "I'd rather mate with a feral badger," Gideon muttered, sitting back down. "Who is next? Let's get this farce over with." Silas sighed and signaled to the guards at the heavy oak doors. "Bring in the Omega contingent. The council insisted we allow all ranks to present, per the old laws." Gideon rolled his eyes. "Wonderful. From ambitious princesses to desperate paupers. Send them in." The mood in the room shifted from tension to mockery as the doors creaked open. The Omega contingent wasn't dressed in silk. They wore simple cotton dresses, some patched, some faded. They were the workers, the cleaners, the runts. The high-born ladies snickered behind their hands, whispering cruel jokes about the trash taking itself out. But at the back of the line, moving with a slow, deliberate rhythm, was a woman who didn't seem to care about the whispers. Her name was Hazel Reed. She wore a grey dress that was clean but shapeless, hiding her figure. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun. She held a white cane in her right hand, tapping it softly against the marble floor. Tap, tap, tap. She wasn't beautiful in the way the other women were. She looked tired. She looked worn. But as she stepped into the light, Gideon's wolf, a beast that had been sleeping for years, suddenly lifted its head. It wasn't a roar of desire. It was curiosity. "Name?" the herald announced, looking down his nose at her. "Hazel Reed," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. It was raspy, like dry leaves over pavement. "Step forward, Omega," Gideon commanded, his voice bored again. "Let's see what you have to offer." Hazel didn't move immediately. She tilted her head, her eyes unfocused and milky white, staring at a point somewhere above Gideon's left shoulder. "I can't step forward," she said plainly. The room went dead silent. A gasp rippled through the crowd. No one told the Alpha King what they could or couldn't do. Gideon leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Excuse me?" "There is a rug," Hazel said, pointing with her cane. "About 3 feet in front of me. It's bunched up. If I step forward, I'll trip. And I'd rather not fall on my face in front of the murderer of the East Coast." The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Silas looked horrified. The guards reached for their weapons. Calling the king a murderer to his face was treason. Gideon stared at her. Then, slowly, he looked down at the floor. There was indeed a slight wrinkle in the ceremonial carpet. For the first time all night, the corner of Gideon's mouth twitched. "You have a sharp tongue for an Omega," Gideon said, his voice low and dangerous. "Do you know who I am?" "I'm blind, Your Majesty, not deaf," Hazel replied, her face completely neutral. "I know who you are. You're the man wasting everyone's time because you're too emotionally stunted to pick a wife." The collective gasp of the court was so loud it sounded like the room had lost oxygen. Silas covered his face with his hand. This was it. She was dead. The guard stepped forward, grabbing Hazel's arms. "Unhand her!" Gideon's roar shook the stained glass windows. The guards froze, releasing her instantly. Gideon stood up, descending the steps of the dais slowly, like a predator stalking prey. He stopped inches from Hazel. He towered over her, his scent of rain and ozone enveloping her. "You call me emotionally stunted," Gideon whispered, close enough that his breath stirred the loose strands of hair by her ear. "And yet you are here, standing in line with the desperate and the ambitious. What does that make you, Hazel Reed?" Hazel didn't flinch. She didn't smell like fear. She smelled like old books and cinnamon. It was a humble, quiet scent, but it was steady. "It makes me an employee, Your Majesty," she said. Gideon frowned. "What?" "I work in the kitchens," Hazel explained, adjusting her grip on her cane. "The head baiter told us that attendance was mandatory for all unmated females between 18 and 30. If I didn't show up, I'd lose my shift pay. I'm just here to get my card stamped so I can go back to peeling potatoes." Gideon stared at her. He blinked. Once? Twice? A laugh bubbled up in his chest, a rusty, unfamiliar sound that startled even him. He threw his head back and laughed, a deep, booming sound that echoed off the stone walls. The court looked on in confusion. The king was laughing? "You're here for the pay?" Gideon asked, wiping a tear from his eye. "It's double time on ceremonial nights," Hazel said seriously. "I have rent to pay." Gideon looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. Up close, he saw the faint scars on her hands from kitchen work. He saw the way her milky eyes held a strange, haunting depth, and he felt a pull in his gut, a magnetic snap that he hadn't felt in 10 years. She wasn't trying to impress him. She wasn't trying to seduce him. She viewed him as an inconvenience to her paycheck. It was the most refreshing thing he had ever experienced. "Silas!" Gideon barked, not taking his eyes off Hazel. "Yes, Alpha?" Silas hurried down the steps. "Clear the room," Gideon commanded. "Sir, all of them. Every single one. Send the princesses back to their castles. Send the Omegas back to their quarters. The ceremony is over." "But did you choose?" Silas asked, confused. Gideon reached out and gently took Hazel's chin in his large, rough hand. She stiffened, but didn't pull away. He tilted her face up, studying her unseeing eyes. "I didn't choose a mate," Gideon said softly, "but I have chosen a dinner companion." He looked at Hazel. "You said you're hungry?" "I said I had to peel potatoes," Hazel corrected him. "Not anymore," Gideon smirked. "Tonight you eat at my table, and I promise the pay will be better than double time." "I don't accept charity," Hazel said, pulling her chin from his grip. "And I don't date tyrants." Gideon's eyes flashed gold. The wolf inside him snarled possessively. "She defies us. I like it." "It's not a date, Hazel Reed." Gideon leaned in, his voice dropping to a seductive growl that usually made women faint. "It's a command from your king. Unless you want to be executed for insubordination." Hazel paused. She seemed to weigh her options. Finally she sighed, the sound heavy with annoyance. "Fine," she said, "but I have dietary restrictions. I'm allergic to strawberries." Gideon grinned, a genuine, predatory grin. "Noted. Clear the hall." As the confused and angry crowd began to disperse, casting hateful glares at the blind Omega in the grey dress, Hazel tapped her cane again. "You're standing on my dress, Your Majesty," she muttered. Gideon stepped back, watching her with an intensity that promised trouble. For the first time in his life, the Alpha King was the one being led. But as the doors closed, a pair of eyes watched from the balcony shadows. Beatrice Kane, the king's advisor and former lover, narrowed her eyes. She gripped the velvet railing until her knuckles turned white. "Enjoy your meal, blind girl," Beatrice whispered, her voice dripping with venom, "because it will be your last." Beatrice turned and walked into the darkness, pulling a small vial from her cloak. The liquid inside was clear, odorless, and lethal. The king was easily bored, she knew. Once he was done playing with his new toy, Beatrice would make sure Hazel Reed didn't just disappear. She would ensure Hazel was erased from existence. But Beatrice didn't know one thing. Hazel Reed wasn't just a blind kitchen girl. She was the keeper of a secret so dangerous, it was the very reason she had blinded herself 10 years ago. And Gideon Stone had just invited that secret into the heart of his kingdom. The royal dining chamber was intimate compared to the grand hall, but it was still large enough to house a small family. A long mahogany table stretched across the room, lit by floating candles enchanted by the pack witches. Gideon sat at the head of the table, watching Hazel. She sat to his right. She hadn't asked for help finding the chair. She used echolocation, subtle clicks of her tongue and the tap of her cane, to navigate the room with eerie precision. Servants placed plates of roasted venison and root vegetables in front of them. The smell was divine. "You navigate well," Gideon observed, cutting into his meat. "The castle echoes," Hazel replied, finding her fork and knife with practiced ease. "Stone walls talk if you listen." "And what do they say about me?" Gideon asked, testing her. Hazel paused, a piece of potato halfway to her mouth. She lowered the fork. They say you are lonely. They say you pace the halls at 3 a.m. when the rest of the pack is sleeping. And they say you scream in your nightmares." Gideon froze. His knife screeched against the china plate. The guards by the door stiffened. "How do you know that?" Gideon's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried a lethal edge. "No one enters my wing at night." "I told you," Hazel said calmly, finally taking a bite of her food. "The walls talk, and I have very good hearing. When you lose one sense, the others compensate. I can hear your heartbeat from here, Gideon. It's skipping." Gideon stared at her. He felt exposed, naked, in a way he hadn't since he was a pup. This blind Omega, this nobody, had just stripped away his armor with a few sentences. "Who are you, really?" Gideon demanded. "Kitchen maids don't speak like you. They don't walk like you." "I'm just Hazel," she said, reaching for her water goblet. "I was found at the border 10 years ago. The pack took me in. I work, I eat, I sleep. That is all?" "You lie," Gideon growled. "And you're paranoid," she countered. Gideon slammed his hand on the table. "I am your king. You will show me respect." Hazel didn't jump. She simply turned her milky eyes toward him. "Respect is earned, Gideon, not inherited. You demand submission because you're afraid that without it, you're nothing. A true alpha doesn't need to roar to be heard." The silence that followed was heavy. Gideon's chest heaved. He wanted to throw her out. He wanted to shake her, but his wolf was pacing in his mind, whining. "She's right. She's strong. She is ours." "Ours?" Gideon thought, shocked. "No, she is an insolent servant." But before he could respond, the heavy double doors burst open. Beatrice Kane strode in, a fake smile plastered on her face. "My king!" Beatrice cooed, ignoring Hazel completely. "I apologize for the intrusion, but there is an urgent matter regarding the northern borders. It cannot wait." Gideon rubbed his temples. "Beatrice, I am eating." "It's about the rogues," Beatrice said, her eyes flickering to Hazel with malice. "They've breached the perimeter. And they left a message." "What message?" "They said they are looking for something," Beatrice said, walking closer to the table. She placed a hand on Gideon's shoulder, marking her territory. "Or rather, someone. A woman. They say she stole something from the rogue king." Hazel's hand tightened around her water goblet. It was a subtle movement, but Gideon caught it. "A woman?" Gideon asked, looking at Hazel. "Yes," Beatrice continued, her voice sickly sweet. "They say she is a thief, a traitor, and that she is blind." Gideon's gaze snapped to Hazel. The air in the room turned freezing. "Hazel?" Gideon asked, his voice low. Hazel slowly put down her glass. Her face was pale, but her expression was hard. "I warned you, Gideon," Hazel said, her voice trembling slightly for the first time. "I don't date tyrants, and I certainly don't get involved in politics. I should go." She stood up, grabbing her cane. "Sit down," Gideon commanded, using his alpha tone. Hazel winced, her knees buckling slightly under the weight of the command, but she forced herself to stand upright. She bit her lip until it bled. "No." "She defies the alpha tone," Beatrice gasped, feigning shock. "Gideon, she must be a witch or a spy. Only an alpha can resist a command like that." Gideon looked at the blind woman trembling, fighting his will with sheer grit. Beatrice was right. An Omega should have been flattened by that command. But Hazel was standing. "Seize her!" Gideon ordered, his voice cold. Guards rushed forward. "Don't touch me!" Hazel shouted. She swung her cane, not blindly, but with terrifying accuracy. The heavy wooden stick cracked against a guard's helmet, sending him stumbling back. She spun around, knowing exactly where the door was, but Beatrice was faster. She stuck out her foot. Hazel tripped. She fell hard, her head cracking against the stone floor. Her cane skittered away. "Pathetic," Beatrice sneered, looming over her. Gideon stood up, a strange panic rising in his chest. "Stop! Beatrice, back away!" But as Hazel lay on the floor, dazed, her dark glasses slid off. And for the first time, Gideon saw her eyes clearly under the candlelight. They weren't just milky white. As she blinked, shaking off the dizziness, the white film seemed to recede for a split second, revealing a color that shouldn't exist. Violet. Glowing. Electric violet. The color of a royal. The color of a legend. "Silas!" Gideon roared. "Get the physician, now!" He vaulted over the table, rushing to Hazel's side. He scooped her up in his arms. She was light. Too light. "Let me go," Hazel whispered, blood trickling from her temple. "You don't know what you've done." "Who are you?" Gideon asked urgently, holding her close. The sparks that erupted where his skin touched hers were blinding. It wasn't just a crush. It was the matey bond. He had just ordered his guards to attack his fated mate. Hazel's head lolled back against his chest. "I am the one thing that can kill you." She passed out. Gideon looked up, his eyes burning with rage. He looked at Beatrice, who was staring at Hazel with wide, fearful eyes. "If she dies," Gideon growled, his voice sounding like gravel grinding together, "I will burn this castle to the ground, with everyone inside it." The royal infirmary was usually a place of sterile silence, smelling of antiseptic and dried sage. Tonight it smelled of ozone, the scent of raw, crackling power. King Gideon Stone paced the length of the room like a caged tiger. Every time he turned, his boots slammed against the floorboards, making the nurses flinch. On the pristine white bed in the center of the room lay Hazel. She looked small against the mountain of pillows, her pale skin translucent under the harsh medical lights. A bandage was wrapped around her head, covering those eyes, those impossible, terrifying eyes. "Tell me," Gideon growled, stopping in front of the pack doctor, an elderly man named Dr. Alden. "Is she dying?" Dr. Alden wiped sweat from his brow. "Physically?" "No, my king. The blow to her head was severe, but her healing ability, it's abnormal. The wound is already closing. It's her energy levels that concern me. She is draining the ambient magic in the room just to breathe. It's as if her wolf is a black hole." "And the eyes?" Gideon asked, his voice dropping. "Did you see them?" "I did," Alden whispered, looking around to ensure no guards were listening. "Violet eyes haven't been seen since the era of the first lichens, 300 years ago. The legends say that a wolf with violet eyes is moon-touched. They aren't just wolves, sire. They are conduits." "Conduits for what?" "For fate," Alden said grimly. "They don't just see the world, they see the threads that bind it. Truths, deaths, futures. It is a heavy burden. Most die before their 18th birthday, because the visions drive them mad." Gideon looked back at Hazel. A surge of protectiveness, so fierce it nearly knocked the wind out of him, rose in his chest. "Mine," his wolf grumbled. "Protect the oracle." "She said she blinded herself," Gideon murmured. "Why would she do that if the eyes are a gift?" "Perhaps," a weak, raspy voice came from the bed, "because the gift is actually a curse." Gideon spun around. Hazel was awake. She was trying to sit up, her hands fumbling against the sheets until she found the metal railing. "Hazel!" Gideon was at her side in a second, his large hands hovering over her but afraid to touch. "Lie down. You have a concussion." "I've had worse," she muttered, touching the bandage over her eyes. "Where is my cane? I need to leave." "You aren't going anywhere," Gideon said, his tone hardening. Not until you explain why my mate, the woman I have waited 30 years for, has been hiding in my kitchen peeling potatoes." Hazel froze. She turned her bandaged face toward him. "Don't say that word. I am not your mate. The bond says otherwise," Gideon said, leaning closer, inhaling her scent of old books and cinnamon. It was stronger now, intoxicating. "I felt the spark. You felt it too. I saw it in your face before you passed out." "That spark isn't love, Gideon," Hazel said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. "It's a fuse, and you're the explosive." She swung her legs over the side of the bed. "Dr. Alden, please tell the king to let me go. If I stay here, if I stay near him, he dies." Gideon grabbed her arm, not aggressively, but firmly enough to stop her. "Explain. Now." Hazel sighed, her shoulders slumping. She looked exhausted, carrying a weight far heavier than her small frame should allow. "I didn't blind myself with a knife, Gideon," she whispered. "I used a seal, a dark magic ritual I bought from a witch in the lowlands when I was 16. Because when I look at people, I don't see their faces. I see their deaths." The room went silent. Dr. Alden gasped. "Deaths?" Gideon repeated. "I see exactly how they die," Hazel continued, her voice devoid of emotion, as if reciting a grocery list. "I see the car crash, the heart attack, the knife in the back. And the closer I get to someone, the clearer it becomes. If I bond with you, if I let the mate bond snap into place, I won't just see your death, Gideon. I will cause it." Gideon stared at her. He thought of the fearless woman in the mating hall who had mocked him. Now he saw a terrified girl who had plunged herself into darkness to save the world from her own eyes. "Is that what you saw tonight?" Gideon asked quietly. "When your glasses fell off, did you see my death?" Hazel hesitated. She bit her lip. "I saw fire. I saw the stone pack burning. And I saw you, Gideon. You were on your knees in the ashes, and there was a sword through your chest." "Whose sword?" "Mine," Hazel whispered. The admission hung in the air like poison smoke. Gideon didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. Instead, he reached out and took her hand. He placed it directly over his heart, which was beating with a slow, powerful rhythm. "Then let it happen," Gideon said. Hazel's mouth fell open. "Are you insane? Did you not hear me? I will kill you." "Or," Gideon said, his thumb stroking her knuckles, "that vision is a warning, not a guarantee. You saw a future where we failed, so we change it. We change the future, Hazel." "You can't fight fate, Gideon," she cried, pulling her hand away. "You arrogant alpha. You think you can punch destiny in the face?" "I've punched everything else in my life into submission," Gideon smirked, though his eyes remained serious. "Why should destiny be any different?" Before Hazel could retort, the infirmary doors banged open. Silas the beta rushed in, looking pale and out of breath. He was covered in mud and smelled of wet fur. "Gideon," Silas shouted, ignoring protocol. "We have a problem, a massive problem." Gideon straightened up, the tender lover vanishing, replaced instantly by the Alpha King. "Report." "The rogues," Silas panted. "They aren't just raiding the borders. They've massed an army. At least 300 wolves. They're at the southern gate." 300? Gideon scowled. "Rogues don't organize. They scatter." "They have a leader," Silas said. "He calls himself King Cyrus, and he's demanding a parley." Hazel let out a small, strangled sound. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated terror. Gideon looked at her. "You know him." "Cyrus isn't a rogue," Hazel whispered, clutching the bedsheets until her knuckles turned white. "He's the alpha of the Obsidian Pack, the pack that burned down 10 years ago. Everyone thinks he died in the fire." "He's alive," Silas confirmed, "and he says he's not leaving until we give him what belongs to him." Gideon's eyes narrowed. "And what is that?" Silas looked uncomfortable. He glanced at Hazel, then back at Gideon. "He says he's here for his wife." Gideon went very still. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He turned his head slowly toward Hazel. "Wife?" Gideon asked, his voice deadly quiet. Hazel shook her head frantically. No, I'm not. I didn't. I ran away before the ceremony. I never completed the bond." "He says his wife is a blind Omega named Hazel," Silas continued, wincing as he felt Gideon's aura flare up, hot and suffocating. "And he says if we don't hand her over by sunrise, he will slaughter every pup in the stone pack." Gideon didn't yell. He didn't roar. He simply walked over to the weapon rack on the wall and grabbed his ceremonial broadsword. "Silas," Gideon said calmly. "Yes, Alpha?" "Prepare the Legion. Tell them we have guests." "And Hazel?" Silas asked. Gideon looked at the woman sitting on the bed, the woman who claimed she would be his death, the woman claimed by another king. "Hazel stays here under triple guard," Gideon ordered. "If Cyrus wants her, he'll have to climb over my cold, dead body to get to her." "Gideon, don't!" Hazel screamed, trying to stand up again. "You don't know what he can do. He doesn't just want me for a mate. He wants my eyes. He wants to use the visions to conquer the territories." "Then he will be disappointed," Gideon said, turning to the door, "because the only thing he is going to conquer tonight is a shallow grave." Gideon stormed out, leaving Hazel screaming his name, the sound echoing off the cold hospital walls. The southern gate of the Stone Pack territory was a massive structure of iron and timber, built to withstand sieges from centuries past. Tonight, it was lit by the flickering orange glow of torches. Outside the gate, the darkness was alive. Hundreds of yellow eyes reflected the torchlight from the tree line. The low, rumbling growl of 300 wolves created a vibration that could be felt in the soles of the defenders' boots. Gideon stood atop the gatehouse, the wind whipping his black cloak around him. To his left was Silas. To his right was Beatrice Kane, who looked far too pleased with the situation. "We should just give her to him," Beatrice whispered, leaning into Gideon. "Think of the pack, Gideon. One blind Omega in exchange for peace. It's simple math. One more word, Beatrice." Gideon didn't look at her. "And I will throw you off this wall myself." Beatrice clamped her mouth shut, her eyes flashing with hatred. "Open the wicket gate," Gideon commanded. "I will speak to this Cyrus." "Gideon, it's a trap," Silas warned. "It's always a trap, Silas. That's the fun part." Gideon descended the stone stairs and walked out onto the open field of snow, alone. He stopped about 50 yards from the tree line. He stood with his hands at his sides, no weapon drawn, projecting pure, arrogant dominance. "Cyrus," Gideon's voice boomed across the clearing. "Come out and face me, you coward." The growling from the woods stopped. A moment later, a figure emerged from the shadows. Cyrus was handsome in a way that made your skin crawl. He had silver hair, pale skin, and a smile that looked like it had been cut into his face with a razor. He wore a long fur coat made from, Gideon realized with a jolt, wolf pelts. "King Gideon," Cyrus bowed mockingly. "A pleasure. I've heard so much about you. Mostly that you have a temper and a problem keeping a woman." "And I've heard you're a ghost," Gideon replied dryly. "Usually ghosts have the decency to stay dead." "I was merely waiting," Cyrus said, stepping closer. "Waiting for my little bird to surface. I lost her 10 years ago, you see. She was very naughty. Ran away on our wedding night." "She says there was no wedding," Gideon said. She says she ran because you're a monster." Cyrus chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Of course she did. Hazel has always had a vivid imagination. It comes with the eyes. Speaking of, are they still beautiful? Or did she ruin them like she threatened to?" "She is under my protection," Gideon stated. "You have no claim here. Leave or die." Cyrus stopped smiling. His face went flat and predatory. "I don't think you understand, boy. I don't want a mate. I want the weapon she carries in her skull. With her visions, I built the Obsidian Pack into an empire. Without her, I'm just a warlord. With her, I am a god. I know where armies will move before they move. I know when kings will die." Cyrus took a step forward, his eyes gleaming. "Give me the girl, Gideon, and I will let you keep your pathetic little kingdom. Refuse, and I will use the knowledge I already have to dismantle your life, piece by piece." "You want a weapon?" Gideon unsheathed his broad sword, the metal singing in the cold air. "Here." Cyrus sighed. "Pity. I was hoping to avoid bloodshed. It stains the snow so dreadfully." Cyrus raised his hand. Behind him, the 300 wolves howled in unison. A terrifying, discordant sound. They began to charge. But before the first rogue could cross the clearing, a sound cut through the chaos. Tap, tap, tap. It was the sound of a cane hitting frozen earth, but it was amplified, echoing as if the ground itself were a speaker. Everyone froze. Even the charging wolves skidded to a halt. Walking out of the main gate, alone, was Hazel. She wasn't wearing her hospital gown. She was wearing a black ceremonial dress she must have stolen from the laundry. The bandage was gone from her eyes. She wore dark sunglasses, but her presence was undeniable. She radiated power, a dark, violet aura that visibly shimmered around her. "Hazel!" Gideon roared. "Get back inside!" "Silence, Gideon," Hazel said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it hit him like a physical blow. The command. She used an alpha command on an alpha king. And it worked. Gideon's mouth snapped shut against his will. His eyes widened in shock. Hazel walked past him, tapping her cane until she stood face to face with Cyrus. "Hello, husband." She spat the word like venom. Cyrus grinned, looking like a child on Christmas morning. "Hazel. My sweet, broken Hazel. You look terrible. Poverty doesn't suit you." "And you look desperate," Hazel retorted. "I told you 10 years ago, Cyrus, if you ever came for me, I would show you the end." "Empty threats," Cyrus scoffed. "You sealed your eyes. You can't see anything." "I broke the seal tonight," Hazel said softly. She reached up and took hold of her sunglasses. "Do you want to see what I see, Cyrus? Do you want to see how you die?" Cyrus took a step back, his confidence faltering for the first time. "You wouldn't dare. The feedback would kill you." "I'm already dead," Hazel said. "I died the night you forced me to watch you murder my parents just to test my powers." She ripped the glasses off. Her eyes were blazing violet, glowing like twin stars. A beam of pure energy seemed to shoot from them, locking onto Cyrus. Cyrus screamed. He fell to his knees, clutching his head. "What are you doing?" he shrieked. "Stop it! Look at it!" Hazel screamed, her voice distorting into something demonic. "Look at your future, alone, cold, eaten by your own greed." The rogue wolves began to whine and back away, terrified by the display of magic. Gideon fought the paralysis, holding his tongue. He focused all his alpha will, breaking the command Hazel had placed on him. "Hazel, stop!" Gideon yelled, lunging forward. "It's killing you!" Blood was pouring from Hazel's nose. Her skin was turning grey. She was channeling too much energy. She was showing Cyrus his death, but the cost was her life force. "Die!" Hazel screamed at Cyrus. Cyrus convulsed, foaming at the mouth. Gideon tackled Hazel. He didn't care about the magic. He didn't care about the violet light. He tackled her into the snow, covering her eyes with his hand, breaking her line of sight. "Enough!" Gideon roared in her ear. "I have you! Let it go!" The violet light faded. Hazel went limp in his arms. Across the field, Cyrus lay panting in the snow, alive but traumatized. He scrambled backward, looking at Hazel with pure horror. "She's insane!" Cyrus yelled, scrambling to his feet. "Retreat! Retreat!" The rogue king turned and fled, his tail between his legs. His army, seeing their leader broken by a single glance from a blind woman, turned and ran into the woods. Silence fell over the snowy field. Gideon rolled over, pulling Hazel onto his chest. She wasn't breathing. Her face was as white as the snow. "Hazel!" Gideon tapped her cheek. "Hazel, wake up!" Nothing. "Medic!" Gideon screamed toward the gate. "Get Dr. Alden, now!" He pressed his ear to her chest. Her heart was fluttering, a erratic, bird-like rhythm that was fading fast. She had burned herself out. As the pack medics rushed onto the field, Beatrice Kane watched from the wall. A cold smile played on her lips. The girl had done the hard work. She had scared off the enemy. And now, she was going to die from the effort. It was perfect. But down on the field, Gideon did something forbidden. He bit his own wrist, tearing the vein open. He pressed his bleeding wrist to Hazel's mouth. "Drink!" Gideon commanded, his voice breaking. "Take my strength. Take it all." Blood magic. Ancient. Dangerous. And strictly illegal. Hazel's throat moved. She swallowed. Once. Twice. The color began to return to her cheeks. Gideon slumped forward, his forehead resting against hers. "You aren't leaving me, Hazel Reed. Not now. Not ever." Hazel's eyelids fluttered. She didn't open them, but her hand moved, weak and trembling, to grip Gideon's shirt. "You," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You interrupted the vision. I saved your life," Gideon growled. "No," Hazel coughed, a tear leaking from her closed eye. "You saved his." Gideon looked at the dark woods where Cyrus had fled. "He won't be saved for long," Gideon promised. "But tonight, you rest." He picked her up, ignoring the cheers of his pack on the walls. He didn't care about the victory. He only cared about the woman in his arms who had just proven she was more dangerous than any army. But as he carried her back inside, he didn't notice the shadowy figure standing at the edge of the forest. It wasn't a wolf, it was something else. A human, dressed in a suit, watching the scene with binoculars. He lowered the binoculars and pressed a finger to an earpiece. "Target confirmed," the man said. "The subject has unlocked the violet sight. Initiate Phase 2. Capture the king. Kill the girl." The true war hadn't even begun. The sensation of waking up was different this time. Hazel didn't feel the usual cold ache of her joints or the crushing weight of her headaches. Instead, she felt warm, heavy, safe. She inhaled, and the scent was overwhelming. Rain, ozone, and deep, masculine musk. She was in a bed. Not her cot in the servants' quarters, and not the hospital bed. This was a mattress that felt like a cloud, covered in sheets that felt like silk. "Don't move," a voice rumbled from beside her. Hazel stiffened. She turned her head, her milky eyes trying to focus on the blur of heat beside her. "Gideon, you lost a lot of blood," Gideon said. His voice was rough, tired. "Dr. Alden wanted to keep you in the infirmary, but I overruled him. You're in my chambers. It's the only place in the castle where the wards are strong enough to hide your scent." Hazel sat up slowly, clutching the sheet to her chest. She felt a strange thrumming in her veins, a second heartbeat echoing her own. She touched her lips, tasting the metallic phantom of copper. "You gave me your blood," she whispered, the realization hitting her with the force of a slap. Gideon, do you have any idea what you've done? The blood oath. It's forbidden. The council will strip you of your title if they find out. Let them try, Gideon growled. He was sitting in a velvet armchair next to the bed, shirtless, a bandage wrapped around his wrist where he had opened his vein. You were dying, Hazel. I wasn't going to let politics dictate whether you lived. It's not just politics, Hazel snapped, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. She felt stronger than she had in years. The king's alpha blood was acting like a supercharger for her system. It creates a bond, a forced bond. You've tied your life force to mine. If I get hurt, you bleed. If I die, you die. I am aware of the mechanics, Gideon said calmly. He stood up and walked over to her. He took her hand, placing it on his chest. I told you. I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of losing. You are an idiot, Hazel said, though her voice lacked its usual bite. She pulled her hand away, flustered. Where is Cyrus? Did he return? He's running, Gideon said, his expression darkening. My trackers say he crossed the river into the neutral lands, but he's not the problem anymore. What is? Beatrice, Gideon said. She saw me feed you. She saw the violet eyes. And she disappeared from the wall before I could get back. Silas can't find her. Hazel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. She's gone to the High Council. Likely, Gideon shrugged, grabbing a fresh shirt from a nearby chair. It will take her 2 days to reach the capital and petition for a hearing. By then you will be strong enough to travel. We'll go to the Northern Keep. It's a fortress. We can plan our defense there. 2 days? Hazel tilted her head, listening to the castle. The stone walls were vibrating. A low, rhythmic thumping sound, like hundreds of boots hitting the pavement, was coming from the main road. Gideon, Hazel whispered. Do you hear that? Hear what? The marching. Hazel stood up, grabbing her cane, which was leaning against the nightstand. It's not 2 days away. They're here. Gideon frowned. He walked to the window and threw open the heavy curtains. His blood ran cold. The courtyard below wasn't empty. It was filled with black SUVs. Not military vehicles, but high-end, government-issued transport. And standing at the front gate wasn't an invading army of wolves. It was a delegation of the High Council, flanked by their elite enforcers, wolves clad in silver armor, designed to suppress alpha auras. And leading them was Beatrice Kane, wearing a smug smile that could curdle milk. She didn't go to the capital, Gideon realized, his hands clenching into fists. She called them. She must have had them on standby. The door to Gideon's bedroom burst open. Silas rushed in, looking frantic. Gideon, the High Elder is here. Elder Arthur Pendleton. He has a warrant. For what? Gideon demanded. I am the king. Not anymore. A dry, crisp voice spoke from the doorway. Elder Arthur Pendleton stepped into the room. He was an ancient wolf, his hair white, his face lined with a century of hard decisions. He held a scroll in his hand. Behind him stood 6 enforcers, their silver spears tipped with wolfsbane. Beatrice stood just behind his shoulder, looking at Hazel with a mixture of triumph and disgust. Gideon Stone, Pendleton read from the scroll, not looking up. You are hereby accused of heresy, the practice of forbidden blood magic, and harboring a Class A threat against the lycanthrope species. By the authority of the High Council, you are stripped of your crown, your lands, and your rank. You have no proof, Gideon snarled, his alpha aura flaring. The room shook. The enforcers stepped back nervously, but Pendleton didn't blink. We have a witness, Pendleton gestured to Beatrice, and we have the girl. Pendleton looked at Hazel. Violet eyes, the oracle of ruin. You should have been smothered at birth, child. She is under my protection, Gideon roared, stepping in front of Hazel. If you want her, you go through me. We anticipated that, Pendleton sighed. He snapped his fingers. Beatrice stepped forward, holding a remote control. She pressed a button. A high-pitched frequency, inaudible to humans but agonizing to wolves, blasted through the room. Gideon fell to his knees, clutching his ears, roaring in pain. It was a sonic suppressor, illegal technology usually reserved for torture. Silas collapsed in the hallway, screaming. Hazel, however, stood still. The frequency hurt, but her hearing was adapted to chaos. She didn't crumble. "Stop it!" Hazel screamed, swinging her cane at the nearest enforcer. "You're killing him!" An enforcer caught her cane and backhanded her across the face. Hazel spun and hit the floor, tasting blood. "Seize the king!" Pendleton ordered over the noise. "Chain him in silver, and take the girl to the containment unit. The buyer is on his way." "Buyer!" Gideon gritted out, fighting the noise, trying to stand. His eyes were bleeding. "What? Buyer?" Beatrice walked over to Gideon, who was struggling to stay conscious. She crouched down, whispering in his ear. "Did you really think this was just about the council, Gideon?" she hissed. "The council is afraid of her eyes. Yes. But they are also greedy. There is a private organization, humans, who pay very well for biological rarities. They offered the council $1 trillion for the violet wolf, enough to fund our kind for a century." "You traitor!" Gideon spat blood at her. "I'm a patriot!" Beatrice wiped her face, her expression cold. "I'm saving the pack from a king who would burn it down for a blind cripple." She nodded to the enforcers. "Take him away." Thick silver cuffs were slapped onto Gideon's wrists and ankles. The burning metal neutralized his strength instantly. He was dragged out of the room, thrashing and roaring Hazel's name. Hazel lay on the floor, dizzy, as 2 guards hauled her up by her arms. "Don't worry, dear," Beatrice said, smoothing Hazel's hair mockingly. "You aren't going to prison. You're going to a lab. I hear they have wonderful experiments planned for those eyes of yours." Deep in the obsidian dungeons, Gideon Stone made a choice. The silver chains burned his wolf side like acid, so he forced the beast down. Embracing his human frailty, he roared with exertion and ripped the bolts from the crumbling stone wall. He was free, and he was furious. High in the royal tower, Beatrice Kane watched eagerly as Agent Grant, the Vanguard buyer, transferred billions of dollars for the violet wolf. Hazel sat bound in a chair, listening to the wind, knowing her fate was sealed. Suddenly, the oak doors exploded inward. Gideon stood in the debris, trailing broken chains from his wrists like a gladiator. Grant fired his high-tech plasma pistol, but Gideon was faster than thought. He whipped the silver chains, deflecting the shot and backhanding the agent over the balcony railing into the night. Beatrice shrieked, realizing her plan had failed. Cornered and insane with jealousy, she snatched a serrated silver dagger from the table. "If I can't have the crown," she screamed, "no one gets the oracle." She hurled the knife directly at Hazel's chest. Hazel couldn't move. She heard the whistle of the blade and braced for the end. Thud! A heavy weight crashed against her knees. Hazel gasped. Gideon had stepped in front of her. The silver dagger was buried to the hilt in his heart. "Gideon!" Hazel screamed, ripping her hands free from her bonds. He collapsed into her arms, blood pooling on the floor. "I told you," Gideon choked out, his hand trembling as he touched her face. "I don't lose." His hand dropped. The Alpha King was dead. Hazel held his lifeless body, her grief shattering the final seal on her power. Her eyes didn't just glow violet. They turned white with the blinding light of resurrection. The tower exploded with violet light. As Hazel pressed her lips to Gideon's, the ancient energy of the oracle flooded his veins, stitching his heart back together. Gideon gasped, his back arching as life returned to him with a roar. He sat up, catching Hazel as she slumped backward. Her eyes, once blazing with cosmic power, were now a dull, milky grey. The violet glow was gone forever. She had traded the ultimate power for his heartbeat. "Hazel," Gideon whispered, crushing her to his healed chest. "I can't see the future anymore," she murmured, her hand resting over his heart. "It's all dark." "Then I will be your eyes," Gideon vowed, kissing her forehead. "For the rest of our lives." Below them, an engine roared. Beatrice was trying to flee. Gideon stood, his eyes flashing with a terrifying new strength. He didn't need to shift. He leaped from the tower balcony, landing directly on the hood of Beatrice's escaping SUV. The metal crumpled like paper. Gideon ripped the door off and dragged the screaming traitor out, casting her into the roguelands to rot. 1 month later, the stone castle was draped in banners of gold. Hazel stood on the royal balcony, a crown resting on her dark hair. She couldn't see the thousands of wolves cheering for her below, but she could feel their love. Gideon stood behind her, his arms wrapped possessively around her waist. "What do you see, my king?" she asked softly. Gideon looked out at the sunrise, then down at the woman who had defied him, fought for him, and saved his soul. "I see my future," Gideon replied, resting his chin on her shoulder. "And it is beautiful." The blind Omega had lost her sight, but she had found her vision, and the Alpha King finally learned that true power wasn't in command. It was in submission to love. Wow, what a journey. That was the story of Hazel and Gideon, a tale of betrayal, sacrifice, and a love that literally defied death. I hope you enjoyed this dramatic werewolf romance saga. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please smash that like button right now. It helps the channel so much and tells me you want more stories like this. Did you expect that ending? Let me know in the comments below. Type Violet Queen if you think Hazel made the right choice to sacrifice her powers for Gideon. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next part of our storytelling journey. We have even crazier stories coming up next week, featuring revenge, secret heirs, and forbidden mates. Share this video with a friend who loves werewolf drama. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.